At 2:14 in the afternoon on a Wednesday in late October, a 26-year-old outdoor content creator who went by the channel name RidgeRunner opened a livestream from the base of a narrow canyon wall in the Arizona desert, looked into the camera, and said the words that would open the video. "All right, guys, no gear challenge, part 4. Let's see if this wall wants to fight." 14 minutes later, he was still talking when a handhold gave way beneath him. He fell nearly 80 feet to the canyon floor, live, in front of several hundred people, watching in real time. This is the story of how a recurring content series built around free climbing without ropes or protective gear, a series that had already produced 3 successful, well-performing videos, ended on its 4th attempt, and what it reveals about the specific pressures that shape decisions made for an audience rather than for oneself. His name was Dylan Cortez, though almost none of his roughly 140,000 subscribers knew him by that name. Online, he was RidgeRunner, a channel he'd built over 4 years, initially around fairly conventional hiking and camping content, before gradually shifting toward more extreme, higher stakes videos as his following grew. And, with it, the pressure to keep producing content that outperformed whatever had come before. Dylan was a genuinely capable outdoorsman by most measures. He'd grown up hiking and scrambling in the desert Southwest, had done some structured rock climbing at an indoor gym in his early 20s, and had picked up enough real technical knowledge over the years to sound credible on camera. He understood, in the abstract, concepts like rock quality, hold assessment, and route difficulty rating. What he had not done, at any point in his climbing background, was pursue formal training in traditional or sport climbing with actual protective systems, ropes, harnesses, protection placed in the rock, a belay partner managing his fall risk from below. His climbing knowledge was almost entirely self-taught, built from watching other climbers, some instructional videos, and his own trial and error on relatively low-consequence terrain. The No Gear Challenge series had begun 8 months earlier, somewhat spontaneously, when Dylan free climbed a short, low-risk boulder problem during an otherwise ordinary hiking video and noticed in the analytics afterward that the segment had dramatically outperformed the rest of that episode. He built on it. Episode 2 was a slightly taller, slightly more exposed scramble. Episode 3, filmed 2 months before this story's events, was taller still, close to 50 feet, on a route he'd scouted in advance and practiced sections of beforehand, though never the complete route from bottom to top before filming. Each episode had performed better than the last. The comment sections filled with a specific kind of engagement that reinforced exactly the direction the series was heading. Excitement, disbelief, requests for the next one, to go even bigger. Pause, the canyon wall Dylan chose for episode 4 was one he'd noticed on a scouting hike roughly 3 weeks earlier, a section of exposed, weathered sandstone rising close to 80 feet from the canyon floor, part of a minor unnamed canyon system on public land outside a small town in northern Arizona. It wasn't a formally documented climbing route. There was no established grade, no climbing guidebook entry, no record of prior ascents by the local climbing community, because it wasn't the kind of feature experienced technical climbers typically chose to climb at all. Not because it was impossible, but because the rock quality was known locally among the small handful of climbers familiar with the area to be poor, loose, weathered, prone to holds that looked solid but weren't. Dylan had scouted the base of the route on that earlier hike, examined the lower 20 feet or so from the ground, and judged it climbable based on visible hand and foot placements he could identify from below. He had not climbed any portion of the route in advance of filming. He had not consulted anyone with more technical climbing background about the rock quality in this specific canyon. He had not researched whether the local climbing community had documented reasons for avoiding routes on this particular rock formation. What he had done was scheduled the shoot, told his small production assistant, a friend named Cole, who handled a second camera angle and basic safety spotting from the ground, that this would be the biggest episode yet, and prepared to livestream the entire attempt in real time, a format he'd started using for this specific series specifically, because live content generated noticeably higher engagement and a stronger sense of real stakes for viewers than pre-recorded and edited footage did. Pause. The stream opened with Dylan at the base of the wall, chest-mounted camera, and a second angle from Cole's phone about 30 feet back, giving the small live audience, which grew from a few dozen to several hundred within the first few minutes as notifications went out to subscribers, an introduction to the route. He talked through what viewers were about to watch in the confident, practiced cadence of someone who had done this several times before on camera. No rope, no harness, no protective gear of any kind, just him and the rock. He pointed out a few features on the lower section of the wall, explained in general terms what made a route like this challenging, and set expectations for an exciting climb. What he did not do, at any point in this introduction or in the minutes that followed, was specifically address rock quality. The single most important variable for a route like this, and the one piece of information that mattered most for what was about to happen. He'd assessed the wall visually from a distance 3 weeks earlier, and again, briefly that afternoon, before starting the stream, but had not physically tested the specific handholds he intended to use higher up the route, the way an experienced traditional climber routinely does before committing weight to an untested hold, a practice sometimes called hollow tapping, listening and feeling for a dull, hollow sound that can indicate a loose or detached piece of rock versus the solid ring of well-attached stone. The early portion of the climb went smoothly, consistent with what Dylan had scouted from the ground. He moved confidently through the first 20 feet or so, narrating as he went, describing hand placements, talking through his reasoning for route choices, occasionally addressing comments Cole relayed from the live chat. This narration, while good for engagement, carried its own quiet cost, sustained. Talking during a physically and mentally demanding climb divides attention in a way that experienced climbers are specifically trained to minimize during difficult or run-out sections where full concentration on hold quality, body position, and next moves matters most. Dylan had done this successfully in 3 previous episodes, and nothing in those experiences had taught him that it carried any real cost. His climbing brain and his content creator brain had, by this point, effectively merged into a single mode of operation that treated narration as simply part of climbing, rather than as a competing demand on his attention. By 2:22, he'd reached roughly the halfway point of the route on a small stance where he paused to catch his breath and address the stream directly. The numbers were good, chat was engaged, and he told his audience with visible excitement that the next section was where it gets real. Pause. The upper half of the wall was steeper and more exposed than the lower section, with fewer obvious large holds and more reliance on smaller, less certain features. Dylan worked through it more slowly, the narration thinning out somewhat as the physical and mental demand increased, though he continued talking in shorter bursts, confirming holds out loud, occasionally acknowledging chat, maintaining the connection with his live audience that the entire format depended on. At around 2:26, roughly 65 feet up the wall, He reached a section requiring a committing move to a handhold above, and, to his right, a protruding edge of sandstone that looked, from where he stood, like a solid positive hold, capable of bearing his full weight during the transition. He mentioned it to the camera in the kind of half-narration, half-self-talk that had become his default mode throughout the series. "Okay, this one right here, this is my move." He reached up, gripped the hold, and began shifting his weight onto it. Pause. Weathered sandstone that had appeared solid from below and had never been physically tested before. Dylan committed his full weight to it, fractured and separated from the wall. He fell immediately, without the ability to arrest or redirect the fall in any way, given the complete absence of rope, harness, or any protective system between him and the canyon floor roughly 80 feet below. Cole, filming from the ground, dropped his phone and ran toward the base of the wall the instant he registered what was happening. But 80 feet is, in practical terms, no distance at all in the time a fall of that height actually takes. There was nothing he or anyone else at the scene could have done in the available time to change the outcome. The stream, still live, continued recording for several more seconds after the fall before Cole reached the phone and the broadcast was manually ended. Pause. Cole called 911 immediately. Local emergency services, along with a regional search and rescue unit accustomed to responding to canyon and cliff incidents in the area, arrived within roughly 25 minutes. Given the location's relative accessibility compared to more remote canyon settings, Dylan was pronounced dead at the scene. The specific cause was consistent with the severity and nature of a fall from that height onto uneven rock terrain. Several hundred people had been watching the stream in real time when the fall occurred. Within hours, clips and screen recordings had already begun circulating well beyond his own subscriber base, turning what had been a mid-sized content creator's live broadcast into a widely discussed news story. Coverage that, in the days that followed, focused heavily on the broader phenomenon his death had come to represent. Content built specifically around escalating, ungeared risk, produced for an audience whose engagement metrics had, over 8 months, become an increasingly direct input into what level of danger felt acceptable to attempt next. Pause. There is no single isolated mistake at the center of this story. There is a pattern built up gradually over 8 months and 4 episodes, in which each individual choice made sense in the context of the choice before it, while the cumulative direction of the entire series moved steadily further from anything resembling responsible risk management. The decision to select a route on rock specifically known within the small local climbing community that existed near this canyon to be of poor and unpredictable quality. A piece of information Dylan never sought out because he had no established connection to that community and no formal climbing background that would have made seeking out that kind of local knowledge an automatic step before attempting a new route. Pause. Free climbing without protective gear removes the single largest safety margin available in the sport of climbing, the ability to fall without the fall itself being the determining factor in survival. Every experienced traditional or sport climber operates with the understanding that any given handhold, however solid it appears, can fail, and the entire structure of ropes, harnesses, and placed protection exists specifically to make that possibility survivable. Remove that structure, and a single hold failure on any route at any height beyond a short, low-consequence boulder problem becomes a potential fatality rather than a recoverable mistake.